35-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Welcome back, everybody. Another preview here on the Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes, along with Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney. I'm Mitch Mason. Glad to be back in Trey. God's Conference is what you're calling it. You can call it the Conference of Chaos, the Spin Zone, whatever you come up with. The Conference on I-35, I think, are all apt descriptions of the Big 12. And this may be the most fascinating conference from top to bottom, not necessarily because they have the best teams or the best championship outlook, but as we've kind of alluded to throughout past episodes, there's like 12 teams out of the 16-team conference that you could look up at the end of November and go, sure, yeah, they're one win away from Arlington.
Yeah, and we've seen that throughout this conference's history. Last couple of years, I think I tweeted last November in the Big 12 is not for the faint of heart because there were like 6 teams tied for first place at that point. So we're going to see something like that again. It's going to be crazy. You just throw them in the spin cycle. And yeah, I've been joking all offseason. There's 10 teams that could legitimately win the conference championship. You want to bump it to 12? I probably don't have a problem with that for the branding aspect of it. But it's going to be a crazy fun conference, tons of personalities, tons of new faces experiencing these venues for the first time and experiencing a coast to coast conference for the first time. I'm excited. Sign me up, man.
Brett Yormark has been trying to do things cutting edge. Everybody else has been saying, no, we're focused on the teams that are in our conference. Yormark is like, man, we're open for business, baby. Just neon 24-hour sign. You want to do business? I'll have a firm handshake for you. Private equity might be coming to the Big 12 very, very soon. There was rumors of the All-State 12 conference a little while ago. So the Big 12 feels like a geopolitical battleground just as much as it is a gridiron battleground. But we're going to get into the football side of things here in just a moment. If you are new to this channel, to our preview series, welcome. We're glad to have you along for the ride. At 3TechPod is where you can find us on all social platforms. We'd love to have you follow, subscribe. We're very close to 1,000 followers on basically each of our individual channels. And if you haven't done so, we'd love to join the Jimmies and the Joes. So hit follow, hit subscribe, leave us a great review on Spotify. That helps us continue to grow the channel as well. And the order that we've been doing these previews in so far, we've done the Big Ten, we've done the SEC. We gave our listeners a survey a little while ago and let them power rank the teams. We put them into a mathematical equation. Trey ran the numbers, averaged everybody out, and the power rankings are what our listeners decided. So we're doing 6 teams in this episode. We'll do 10 through 5 or 10 through 6, I guess, in the next episode, and the top 5 teams in the Big 12, according to you, the listener, on Friday. So stick around. You'll get the full series here at 3TechPod. Guys, let's jump into it, shall we? Arizona State, number 16. They are the cellar dweller here in the Big 12, and they're batting leadoff for the teams in this episode that we're calling teams in waiting. That seemed like the perfect theme for these teams because I think you can see a future where they're winning in a wide open Big 12 conference, certainly without kind of that power vacuum filled quite yet. We have teams that we think are going to step into that power vacuum, but right now it's kind of like opening day for baseball. Everybody's got hope. Everybody's got a chance of making the playoffs. These 6 teams, it would take a minor miracle to get to contention in the Big 12, heck, even to a bowl game. And Arizona State is kind of chief among them, right? Herm Edwards did this team incredibly dirty the last couple of years before he was finally fired with cause. was not recruiting, was breaking the rules over COVID. And Kenny Dillingham came in last year from Oregon and tried to start to pick up the pieces. And while the Jaden Rashada saga did not go well, the record on the field was just about as ugly as you could expect. It was 12 games under the belt of Kenny Dillingham that it's a guy that's young. It's a guy that wants to do fun things on offense. And I think he's going to recruit talent to Tempe, where Arizona State maybe 2-3 years down the line, Garrett. I think that's when you look up and you start to say, you know what, back in 2023, 2024, Dillingham was laying the railroad tracks to get this thing going the right way.
Yeah, and I really like what he's doing. I think he's done a pretty good job so far, given what he inherited. Right, there's not a whole lot that he inherited. He got a good quarterback that came in, obviously not sticking around. But if you look at some of the results last year, they played competitive games even when they lost. There were some real competitive games. They took Washington almost to the brink. That's a Washington team that again played in the whole thing and was playing for a championship at the end of the season. So they had some good moments. They certainly had some moments where things went right. And it's certainly, I think a lot of Arizona State fans should be feeling okay about it, because you could see a scenario where they're one of the teams that got left behind in the Pac-12. So the fact that they got, their transition over to the Big 12 anyways, I think is a big deal for Arizona State. The fact that they're going to get a chance to kind of grow in this new conference, get a change of scenery. Now, does it translate to wins in year one? Probably not. Probably not a whole lot of wins this first year. Big new cast of characters coming in, and you lose a bunch of guys, you gain a bunch of guys. It's going to be some new faces, and that's just kind of what they're going to have to work with. I do think they have some good running backs, so there certainly could be some, maybe some reason for optimism there. But I think it is fair to say that the Sun Devils are just kind of in a spot where they need to rebuild. They need to just look to turn the page, look to say, what, like right now we're not. We're not, going to be competing for the top of the conference. Anything could happen, right? You could find a miracle and guys could develop out of nowhere. But if you're just looking at what you have right now on paper, you're probably not thinking you got much of a shot at the top of the conference. But, you can build on some stuff. You can go get a couple of those wins, turn a couple of those close losses into close wins this year, flip a couple of those, get up close fighting maybe for bowl contention. Like there could be some good results this year. To be fair, the scoring offense, scoring defense, finishing, very, very, very close to the bottom in all of college football. So, you got to look at this as it can only go up from here. So do one thing right or do one thing a little bit better this year. It could translate into better stats and, maybe another win or two this year that could put you in a spot where you could say, okay, now we can sell something, next year when guys are in the transfer portal. Now we can sell something to recruits. And who knows what things look like next year with alignment. Who knows what, college football is going to look like, over the next couple of years. So, all you're trying to do right now, I think, if Arizona State, stand pat, don't lose a bunch of ground, go out there, compete, win a bunch of games with the new guys you got, try to win through the transfer portal going forward.
There's a whole lot of new that's on this Arizona State team. Offensively, they've got some fun pieces in the background. Cam Scatterborough is one of the kind of unsung running backs in the nation. Quietly had a very solid season last year. He's got Raleek Brown from USC and Alton McCaskill, who transferred over from Colorado, joining him. They're going to have a new quarterback. It's probably going to be Sam Levitt from Michigan State. I doubt that the Jeff Sims experiment continues to ride, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So I like Sam Levitt to win that job. Had a nice spring. Their defense is basically all new. They've got guys like Jeffrey Clark from Louisville, Keyshawn Elliott from New Mexico State, Jordan Crook, local kid from Arkansas, playing linebacker for them. So they've got a lot of potential. And Garrett, I think you nailed it, where this year success is not going to be determined by wins and losses, right? The over-under is 4.5. I think if they were to get over that, especially with the non-conference, which we can dive into here in a second, minor miracle, but it's just start to put one foot in front of the other. Start to distance yourself from all the damage that Herm Edwards did. And if you can show those glimmers of hope, Arizona State's a very attractive program, right? I mean, a big college campus, kids love going there. Arizona State has had success in the past. They've been a dangerous team back in the Pac-12 days. I don't know exactly what their path to success is long-term in the Big 12, but again, you're not really focused on that this season. It's starting to do those little things. And, I don't know what you're going to be able to draw after this non-conference schedule, guys. It is Wyoming, Mississippi State, at Texas State, at Texas Tech. Dillingham has been handed no favors to start this season. But I think if you can find a way to, maybe you win 2 of those games. I don't know. I think that would start to give the players in that locker room, especially the veterans, a real belief that, yeah, we made a good call for our junior, senior, whatever it is season here.
Yeah, and in terms of like the way the schedule breaks down, there's certainly some other teams that we're about to talk about because they're going to be towards the bottom of the conference that you could go out there and put a dogfight together and go upset a couple of these teams, at least in terms of the way that our fans have ranked this. I think that there's some opportunities on the schedule for a couple of wins here where you can say like, okay, well, based on what we saw last year, based on the kind of the grit and the fight that they showed, you could really argue that there could be, a real turnaround. And you don't know what any of these guys are that are coming in, right? These could be better culture fits for what they're wanting to do. These could be better scheme fits for what they're wanting to do. And so, it's always crazy going year one, and then you're taking over a team that was just kind of decimated and all of that. So I don't think it's time for panic. This is not a bad program by any means, right? This is not some like tiny rink-dink program that just got called up for no reason and conference realignment just so happened to benefit them. This is a good program, right? Historically, this is a pretty decent program. It's just in a low point right now, right? It's right now they're having to come back out of the bottom and say, hey, like we're going to take our L for that one, right? The Herm thing didn't work out. So let's just put that behind us and then move forward. I think they can. Like there's opportunities to win here. And if you can go and just get one kind of statement win, like what happens if they just go and beat Mississippi State on their best possible day? Right? Even if they follow that up with a loss to Texas State and a loss to Texas Tech and a loss to Kansas and a loss to Utah, that's something to talk about, right? It's hey, we beat an SEC team. That's crazy, right? So just go have your best day on the right day, and you can maybe string a couple of wins together, go find a good statement win that can build the program later on.
Just turn the page. Just turn the page this season. Get the momentum going in the right direction. That's Arizona State in the new look Big 12 conference. Number 15 on this list is the Cincinnati Bearcats. And Trey, not a ton went right in Scott Satterfield's first season, a 3-9 year as they introduced themselves to the Big 12 conference. I wrote a team preview for them last year for the Transfer Portal magazine, and I said if the offense could do anything, this team would make a bowl game. That was in completely riding on the defense being in the normal Cincinnati defense, and that was not the case last year. They were terrible in 2023. Couldn't stop a nosebleed. To make matters even worse this season, the Godfather, Dante Corleone, who has been the anchor, was the anchor last year and up front on the defensive line, was expected to be that this season, out with blood clots in his lungs. Indefinite leave of absence. We don't know if he's ever going to play football again. Is Cincinnati, like, where does Cincinnati go? After such a rough year last year, they lose their leader on the field before fall camp even happens. Where are the Bearcats going this season?
Yeah, and it's, just a prevailing narrative for all 4 of these former G5 teams, Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, UCF. Maybe less so UCF because they actually did find some success last year, but this round of realignment has to be really frustrating for them because they probably figured, hey, we'll take our lumps year 1, we'll be competitive year 2, and then we'll finally push through maybe year 3, year 4. Their timeline probably got kicked back another year with the addition of more former Power 5 teams coming into the conference. So that's just starting them off behind the 8 ball already. But I do like what they're doing. I like what they're doing in the transfer portal. All 5 starting linemen offensive linemen are coming back. That you have a 1,000-yard rusher coming back as well in Corey Kiner.
Yep.
That's a good start offensively. You bring in Brendan Sorsby from Indiana to come over to the Big 12 and play. So
big arm. Huge
arm. A lot to be excited about on the offensive side of the ball. And defensively, they bring in some guys in the portal, but maybe the biggest one is Tyson Veit coming over from Iowa State and bringing the 3-3-5 with him. And hopefully that means that he can put more athletes on the field, spread out a little bit more. That seemed to be a lot of what got Cincinnati in trouble last year. They just struggled in games to have the right amount of athletes on the field and to cover the faster athletes and what they've been used to covering in the American Conference. That just seemed to be from 30,000 feet. I'll confess I didn't watch a ton of Cincinnati last year, but when I did, it seemed like they were struggling to catch up to the speed, and hopefully adjusting the defensive scheme, adjusting just the amount of faster guys that you have on the field can really help them with that.
They brought in a ton of safeties, linebackers, DBs, Kai Stokes from Ohio State, Logan Wilson from North Texas. You mentioned the defensive coordinator change that they made, Tyson Veit, linebacker coach at Iowa State. Hybrid 3-3-5 is what they're going to be running this year. We've seen teams in the first half of the season, especially, really struggle to implement that 3-3-5 because it's relying on speed and gap integrity, right? In the front seven. You're not clogging the line of scrimmage up with big bodies. You're hoping that your linebackers are athletic enough to be able to stop the running game and also defend the pass. It's going to take some time in all likelihood to get that going, get comfortable there. And, Scott Satterfield was asked this offseason, what went wrong in year one? He said, honestly, I didn't do enough. He said he left so many things that Luke Fickell had put in place. He left them in place instead of instituting his own strategy, his own culture. And he thought he would be helping the team by leaving those things in place. Luke Fickell obviously succeeded at Cincinnati. Instead, it might have set the Bearcats back another season. And to your point, this realignment, suddenly there's a bunch of new fish in the pond, and Cincinnati's struggling to find out, one, who they are as a football team, offensively and defensively, and two, now they've got to fight against four more teams. Three of them are, probably more qualified to be conference contenders than the Bearcats are right now. But if Brendan Sorsby can come in and with that arm push the ball down the field, that was something that they did not have at all last season.
Yeah, and that, again, like I talked about earlier, they have the running game to complement that, definitely. So I'm less worried. Maybe it'll flip just like last year, but I'm less worried about the offense this year than I was going into last year.
Yeah.
And I think they have the offense to keep up and stay in games. I just wonder if they can stop people, especially like you said in the first half of the year. Losing your defensive tackle, losing the heart and soul of your defense as well. And maybe he'll come back, but just too much unknown right now to really pick a big breakout for the Cincinnati defense. I'm interested to see if they can steal a couple games with their offense. So I think that's their bread and butter. That's what they can. If they're going to steal a couple games and move up the standings, that's going to be why.
It's an interesting schedule that they've got. Townsend Pitt at Miami of Ohio, which they're kind of the runaway favorites to win the MAC early on. They play Houston and Texas Tech. They have to go to UCF. They have to go to Colorado, at Jack Trice Stadium to take on the Cyclones, at Kansas State, and then they'll finish. They finish those two road trips with the kind of the bread of the sandwich, playing West Virginia and then playing TCU. It's a difficult schedule. Over-under is 5.5 for Cincinnati. That feels a little strong for me. And as of writing the preview, the over was getting the love slightly, but the over was getting the love. I think I'm probably taking Cincinnati to go under with so many changes on both sides of the ball, and especially not having the Godfather up front to anchor that 3-3-5. Like that hurts the Bearcats stock for me.
Yeah, and just in general, it's really hard for a program to jump 3 whole wins in one off season, right? 3-9 to 6-6 is a huge jump. So I'm going to take the under as well. Taking the over assumes that they sweep their non-conference, which I know they beat Pitt last year. We haven't previewed Pitt yet, but that's a tall task. They barely beat Pitt last year. And then at Miami, Ohio, game that they lost at home last year. So it's assuming they sweep the non-conference and then pick off probably Houston, UCF, Arizona State, and get it done early. That's a tall task, especially with a couple of those games on the road. I'll take the under as well. But if one of these teams was going to make a big jump, it wouldn't surprise me if it was Cincinnati, just based on the offense and upgrading there.
Sure. I like that. I'd love to see Cincinnati be competitive. I mean, hey, the more teams that want to be chaos in the conference this year, we are always for that in the Big 12. Speaking of chaos, coming in at number 14, the Colorado Buffaloes. The internet's going to love this, I'm sure. Again, reminder, this was a conglomerate of power rankings, not just our own. This was
That doesn't matter, Mitch.
what the public said. Colorado went 4-8 last year, 1-8 in the Pac-12. And for the most part, they got dog walked by the big teams in the conference. They lost a 29-point lead to Stanford, and really just felt like outside of the hype of those first 3 games, it was all sizzle, no steak. Colorado has struggled to recruit the high school ranks. They only took a couple of high school kids this season, and again, relied heavily on the portal. For me, guys, the big questions here. I know the offensive line in name brand has been upgraded, and we'll talk about that. Can they get pass rush pressure? And then if that offense is not able to keep up with some of these high octane offenses in the Big 12, the defense was terrible a season ago. So what strides, what improvements can we see to get Colorado to a bowl game this year?
Look, at the end of the day, for Colorado, it's going to be about continuing to program build, right? You're continuing to build your program. There's things that need to happen. And I think when, Deion Sanders got the job there, we said that the majority of what's going to happen, given his, coaching resume, which at that point wasn't that extensive. He didn't have any, real, experience at the Power 5 up to that point. So he said, there's a chance that what we're looking at here is it's going to be a lot of hype. It's going to be, just the hype machine out of control. Go to Colorado. And that's kind of what we saw last year is we saw the hype machine kind of spin out of control. And, there wasn't a whole lot of substance behind it outside of, there were some impressive wins at the top of that schedule. If you look at, beating TCU and Nebraska, those are a couple impressive wins and you can't take that away from them. But there were some embarrassing losses and there were some close losses. They lost, several games by 1 score. At the end of the day, there's things that put you over the top as a program. And so you have to continue to build. Now, having Shedeur Sanders certainly helps you. He's a very good quarterback. He's plenty talented. He's plenty athletic. He can make all the throws in the field. You bring back Travis Hunter. You bring back Jimmy Horn. A couple of great wide receivers. Like, no fault to any of that. But, guys, this is going to have to be something where they win on the lines of scrimmage. You cannot win football games if you cannot dominate the line of scrimmage. Doesn't matter where you're playing. Doesn't matter if it's the SEC or the Big Ten or the Pac-12 or the Big 12. Or the Mountain West Conference. You're not going to win games if you cannot, win on the line of scrimmage. And right now, that's my big question mark. They weren't that good last year. On the offensive side, Shedeur could kind of bail him out, right? He could kind of, use his legs to get free and find some space. And that was certainly good. They're going to have to keep moving the pocket and doing things like that. But what do you do on the defensive side when the other team just wants to run the ball? What are they going to do when Utah or, I'm looking up and down the schedule, Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas, Arizona, Kansas State. These are teams that like to run the football. What are they going to do when those teams want to run the football on them? What are they going to do week 1 when North Dakota State wants to run the football on them? I'm not trying to be, facetious, but let me be a little tongue-in-cheek here. If these teams are going to want to run the football, we've seen it happen where you can just kind of control the clock and not give the other team's offense any chances to go. And so for me, the big question on Colorado is, you got to get pressure. You got to win, but you got to win on the lines of scrimmage. And those are the big things that I'm looking for Colorado this year. If they can, then all of the believers for Colorado, you're going to be, completely vindicated and they're going to win a bunch of games because they certainly have the skill position talent to win games. If they can't win on the lines of scrimmage, it does not matter who you've got out wide. It does not matter who's behind you at quarterback. And it certainly doesn't matter, on the defensive side if you can't win on the line of scrimmage, because if the other team can push you around, you start with the run game, you set up play action, and it's curtains for you guys. So I'm not trying to sound like a Colorado hater. I think they can continue to build the program the right direction. I just don't know if they've done enough through the offseason, especially through the transfer portal, which seems to be what Deion likes to do. Doesn't seem to like the recruiting game nearly as much. He seems to like the transfer portal, which, I mean, look, Lane Kiffin would, possibly agree with you right there. He likes the transfer portal as well. Difference is Lane Kiffin got his guys on the offensive and defensive lines this year. I don't think Deion did. The difference, I think, is going to be there.
Well, I wouldn't say that. They beefed up on both sides of the lines of scrimmage. Like they went out and they made last year. Last year, I think they assumed that the offensive line, especially, would be a whole lot better. This year, they went out and they got a number of guys: Jordan Seaton, Justin Myers, the kid from Houston, Tyler Johnson. They went out and they got some really nice offensive linemen. Defensively, Samuel Okanola comes over from Pitt. Preston Hodge, DB coming over from Liberty. Like they went and they upgraded the positions that they needed to. I think I'm more worried about depth and like what you were saying with the running game. As teams try and grind you down, who's behind that starting five on the offensive line? If you have an offensive lineman go down, who's behind that starting four along the defensive line? As Travis Hunter needs a blow, right? Who's coming in to back him up?
Right.
I think that's where still Colorado has to convince me that they're building a program, not fielding a football team. Does that? I think that's fair.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I want to make sure they didn't like not get anybody. I'm saying they got a bunch of guys in the portal, but like we'll have to see, right? We're gonna have to wait and see what those guys do because I don't see like massive names on that list. Everybody gets excited about their guys. So all the Colorado fans right now are saying, no, like we got that guy out of the portal. And like, great. Everybody gets a guy in the portal that they like, right? You can point up and down. Every single team in this country right now says, oh, but look out for that tackle we got out of the portal. He's going to change everything. And sometimes they're right. And sometimes they're not right. And that's kind of what I'm saying is, especially in the Big 12, as opposed to the Pac-12, where there's a lot more emphasis on running a lot of times. And a lot of these teams want to run, right? Looking at teams like Kansas State, Oklahoma State, teams like this, they want to run the ball. And you can't get away with, well, we're okay, or like we got one guy, you can't get away with that. And so for me, it's not so much I'm not making a declarative statement they don't have it. I'm making a question statement of like, well, what do they have, right? Are those guys actually going to fill the gap and do the job this year? Because if they don't, then this is just going to be, rinse and repeat for what they did last year. If they can win on the lines of scrimmages, then like, yeah, they're going to go win a bunch of games because if you can give Shedeur Sanders some time to pick apart your defense and let some of these receivers get downfield, then you're going to have issues. You're going to have problems because they got some serious talent at the skill positions. It's really just a big question mark for me because I don't know how all those guys are going to gel together, right? You got to remember, an offensive line is not just individuals. This is five guys gelling together. How do they work together? This is all just waiting to be seen. And they start with a tough test, right? They start with North Dakota State. This is a team that likes to run. They start with, they go to Nebraska. That's going to be another team that's going to want to run the football on you. So like quickly, they're going to be tested right out the gate on that one.
Yeah, they definitely are going to be tested. So Trey, I want to ask you too, like, talk to me about this schedule because they've got an interesting start. North Dakota State is no pushover, right? They absolutely should win this game, but a lot of folks already have their eyes week 1 at Folsom Field. Nebraska, Garrett, you're big on Colorado State. That's a huge rivalry game. That's in Fort Collins. The Rams cannot wait to host Colorado after nearly getting the Buffs last season. Then you look down the rest of their schedule, and they've got a couple of well-timed bye weeks, I think, but I don't see games on this schedule where I go, that's where Colorado can get momentum outside of pulling off an upset over a team that is equal or of greater talent than they are.
So my little metric and looking at the SP Plus and figuring out home field advantages and stuff like that, I have them favored in one game after the Colorado State game.
Yikes.
And that's the Cincinnati game at home.
Okay.
So there's like Garrett's been saying, there's just a ton of unproven talent for sure, but unproven talent at both sides of the line of scrimmage for me. And the schedule does them no favors. All the games that you think that, hey, that's a toss-up on neutral field, they're on the road. UCF, Tech, Kansas, maybe if they can get into a shootout, all those games are on the road. And that doesn't bode well for this team.
I'm interested to see what they can do with the running game, right? They lose Dylan Edwards to Kansas State. They lose Alton McCaskill to Arizona State. In comes Dallas Hayden from Ohio State looking for a starting opportunity. Will Shepard comes in from Vanderbilt out wide. He joined Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn Jr., the USF transfer, as I think the only holdovers from their wide receiver room last year. They either graduated or transferred out. So again, it's a big line change that Colorado's gotten on. We talked about the offensive line. I'm interested to see. I think if the trenches can be better and if this secondary can play more complete football around Travis Hunter, DJ McKinney comes in from Oklahoma State. I mentioned Preston Hodge earlier. The ingredients for Colorado to win games and get on a roll, I think, are more in place this year than they were last year. But again, I need to see Colorado get punched in the mouth and respond the right way. And I think that's where the nation as a whole is out on Colorado until proven otherwise. Maybe that's just me reading too much of the tea leaves, but I think that's kind of where I sit. I feel like Colorado can have some really fun, exciting moments, but I haven't seen Dion be the program builder yet that I'm kind of looking for before I start to buy Colorado stock. To close them out, y'all with me? A little bit more in favor of Colorado. Where would you put yourselves?
I'll take cautious. What's the over? 5.5? Over under 5.5?
5.5. Yes.
I'll cautiously take the over this year and say that they improved by a couple of games. I don't know where those wins are going to come from. I'll be honest to tell you. I think they have the talent to find 6 wins, and I think their schedule is easier than it was last year. It's a difficult schedule, but I think it's easier than what they faced, having to face most of the top Pac-12 teams last year. So I don't know how, but I'll take the over.
I think I could take the over. The wins probably aren't coming in November, just being honest. I'm looking at the schedule in November. Looks like we've got a road trip to Tech. You play Utah, you got a road trip to Kansas, and then you play Oklahoma State. That's probably not going to be the place you find most of your wins this season. But there's some opportunities. I think they can go win a bunch of the games at the top of the schedule. I do think that Colorado State game is a little bit of a trap that's going to be on the road. And it's going to be a true road game, which is, I know that all those Colorado State fans are going to be, pumped up to finally go get the rival and the in-state rival and go get them. But I still think they win that game. Baylor, not very good. They'll probably beat North Dakota State. They could beat Central Florida for sure. It is on the road, but they could beat them. And then, at that point, you start to kind of fall off and say, like, you got the Cincinnati in there, but, Kansas State, at Arizona, there's just not a whole lot after that. I think they can get to 6. I think they've made enough improvements on the lines of scrimmage to win at least 6. I don't think that the big championship hype that you hear out of a lot of the Colorado sides, I don't think that's quite warranted. They're still probably a couple of years away.
I just want to hang out with whoever's putting money on Colorado to win the national championship this year, because man, they must buy folks a lot of dinners. Drinks are always on them. They just have cash.
They got money to burn. Money to burn.
Right.
I wish I had Colorado betting market money.
They do not need a return on investment to have a good time. That's that betting crowd for sure. All right, number 13, BYU. The Cougars a little bit higher on this list than I have on my personal list. Kalani Sitake went 5-7 last year. It was 2-7 in conference. Trey, the offense looked dreadful, and in the preseason, I can't remember which one of us was believing in Keaton Slovis, but okay, was it you? I wasn't sure if it was you.
It was me.
Certainly wasn't going to throw you under the bus if it without knowing. But early on, I mean, they won against Sam Houston State, like 13-0, and that kind of set the tone. They had some glimmers, they had some moments, but boy, Kalani Sitake has gone from local hero to, I think, folks starting to wonder, is he the guy for the job as BYU enters a power conference status for a second year?
Yeah, and those questions are really valid ones because they completely folded down the stretch, and that was not indicative of what we've seen from Kalani Sitake in the past. We've seen him win big games. We've seen him close out seasons well, but they lost their last 5 straight games. I will say it was a difficult schedule last year. They were not favored in a game after week 2 last year. I had to confirm that stat. They were not favored in a game until after week 2 last year. They were underdogs in their last 10 games. So a difficult schedule to be sure, but you hope that you go better than 3-7 in those 10 games, even as a straight up underdog. So lots to consider with a job like BYU. Obviously, it's a unique place. It's not a place that's easy. Always been easy to win. I know that they have a national championship in their past, but you have to have the right guy that really understands how to win at BYU. They're bringing in hopefully a guy to fix the offense this year. Gary Bohannon coming up to his third school, Baylor and USF before this. Obviously, he's led a team to the Big 12 championship before. He's going to get a revenge game narrative on September 28th, it looks like, when he goes to Waco. So I don't know if we need to buy tickets for that one, but I'd be down to be in the house for that revenge game. Yeah, I mean, the offense was really inconsistent last year. A lot of that is on Slovis. A lot of that is on, I think, the scheme and not really having a dominant running back like they've had in the past. They spread it out over a few people. LJ Martin's coming back this year, led the way with, I think, just over 500 yards. So they spread it out. They really didn't have the dominant go-to guy that some of the best BYU teams have had in the past. So I'm interested to see if they can figure that out, if they can establish the run, if they can take some pressure off of Bohannon and really get that offense humming.
Well, we'll see if Bohannon's even the starter. Jake Retzlaff was the better quarterback in the spring. There's a lot of folks thinking that he's been on the roster for longer. He might beat out Bohannon, even though Gary transfers in. That would be a tough break, tough end to the career of Gary Bohannon after being told at Baylor, hey, we don't need you anymore. Going to USF, didn't get to play a lot there, and now maybe not even getting to play at BYU. We'll see. The running game is going to be so critically important. They've got a deep wide receiver stable. So whoever wins that quarterback job, they should be set up for marginal success. For me, though, the defense has got to be better this year. Jay Hill, first-year defensive coordinator at BYU last year, didn't get any pressure on the quarterback. They had a league worst 11 sacks. That was literally the worst QB success rate in the country. And so they've got to be able to disrupt the pocket. They've got to be able to force these quarterbacks who, listen, might not be in the running for the Heisman, but there are a number of really good gunslingers in the Big 12 this year. If you're just allowing them to pick off your secondary all game long, it's going to be another long season for BYU. Their schedule, do you guys see any breaks here? Because I'm torn, because if the offense, if Retzlaff or Bohannon, whoever it is able to inject a spark, if the running game is good, if the defense can take a step forward, which they've got, returners along the defensive line, a couple in the secondary, it's some new faces, but at key positions, they've got returning starters like Tyler Beatty. You can carve out wins in this schedule, but boy, you can't mess around.
No, you really can't. And it's another team whose home road splits are really difficult.
Yeah.
Go to Baylor, to UCF, to Arizona State. So even the games that you might want to you're tempted to pencil in as a win against teams towards the bottom half of the conference, they're on the road. So it's really difficult to see them string off a bunch of wins in a row. I could see them starting well after the SMU game. I'd like maybe sandwiching a couple wins around SMU, Southern Illinois, and Wyoming. That Wyoming game is going to be really interesting. Even that one's
in
on the
Laramie,
road, right?
Yeah.
So it's difficult with all those road games to find like, okay, that's where they find their runway. That's where they really get going and get their traction under them.
They've got, after the first bye week, Arizona, Oklahoma State, at UCF, and then the last 4 games at Utah, Kansas, at Arizona State in a rivalry game versus Houston. There's a chance that BYU could find a couple of wins. There's a chance BYU could literally go over in that stretch. I think so much is unknown about this BYU team. What's certain, though, is this is a massive year for Kalani Sitake, because especially in this age of realignment, where the Big 12 is potentially going to be even more aggressive about adding teams from other conferences, the ACC, if that were to fall apart. You got to keep pace. You can't just settle for making a bowl game in your conference right now. If you're going to be serious about football, you've got to make a way and find a path that keeps boosters donating to the school, that gets recruiting, believing that there is a chance for you to contend for a conference championship, dream about a college football playoff berth, you get wrecked by this schedule. And even though Sataki is beloved up there, I don't know if there are going to be many voices saying, yeah, he's still the right man for the job. Give him a chance. That's my worry about BYU at the end of this season.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think he's definitely more on the hot seat than he's closer to being fired than he is to saving his job at this point, sitting here in July.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it takes. Like winning a bowl game, I think would certainly save his job, or making a
Sure.
bowl game, I should say. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The future is really interesting for a team like BYU, just trying to figure out where they stand.
Yeah. Two more teams left in this episode. We've got the Houston Cougars up next, coming in at 12th in the rankings. Houston went 4-8 last year, 2-7 in conference play. Dana Holgorsen fired by the brass down there in Houston, and they bring in Willie Fritz, who has won everywhere he's gone. He rebuilt a Tulane program all the way into a Cotton Bowl championship in 2023. I think this year, again, you look at the schedule, and it's another one of those teams that, again, they're the teams in waiting for a reason. They've got a lot of fun pieces. Donovan Smith at quarterback. They've got exciting skill talent. I think the defense, it's a lot of new faces on that defense, but man, that's what dreams are made of. The problem, Garrett, is this schedule. This schedule is disgusting. What Trey was saying about BYU being an underdog every week after week 2, you could see something very, very similar happening with Houston, maybe outside that BYU game once you get basically to the last week of September. I mean, it's grueling.
Yeah, it's not the best schedule you could be hoping for as a first-year head coach, right? This isn't probably what you'd like to walk into. But look, I mean, if you're talking about, those G5 coaches making the jump to the Power 5 level, there's not really a lot more guys I would trust to run my program than Willie Fritz. Fritz is one of the best coaches. He wins everywhere he goes, and he's going to prove himself, and I think he's going to build Houston up. I think he's going to be able to, really do something there and turn this Houston program into something in the Big 12. Again, it's all about timing, and it's all about not having too big of expectations too quick, right? Like he's going to win. You just got to give him time. I love the quarterback, Donovan Smith, fun, talented, athletic. He's going to be a lot of fun. And whenever you have a quarterback like that, you can find your way into some wins, right? You're going to be able to find your way into some wins. There's a couple of guys that they bring back in terms of, pass catchers, skill position guys. They, nice haul in the portal. Anytime you bring in a new regime, it's going to just be a revolving door of guys coming in, going out. So, they're going to lose they lost some pieces. They're going to bring some pieces in. I'm not really concerned about all that. It's going to be scheme for me. I want to see how these guys take to the scheme, right? How do these guys take to the coaching, implement what they're doing? They're not making stupid spacing mistakes or getting lost out there, right? I want to see that they can do that. And I want to see them go out and compete a little bit. And I think with a talented quarterback like Donovan Smith, I think you can do that. But yeah, you're spot on about the schedule. You go UNLV at Oklahoma, Rice at Cincinnati, and then let's get into the meat of the conference. You go Iowa State at TCU, at Kansas, Utah, Kansas State, at Arizona, Baylor, and then you finish at BYU. There's probably not a lot of wins there. You might be able to book in the season with, a little Baylor, BYU. You can maybe go 2 for right there. But, I mean, man, it's going to be tough in this first year. What I want to see out of it, though, is I want to see him compete, right? I just said kind of want to see him hang in some of those games, even if you're not going to beat a lot of those teams. Go be competitive and go show the next guys up, right? The next guys in the transfer portal waiting to maybe we go to Houston or the guys they're recruiting, and certainly a hotbed of recruiting there in Houston. If they can start to grow a little bit and maybe pull an upset, maybe be really competitive, you might be able to sell something to them there. And again, Fritz is a guy I trust to build a program. But there's a reason they're at the bottom of the list right now. I don't think they stay at the bottom for very long. But right now, it's just going to be too many question marks, too many new pieces, too many new schemes, too many new coaches, too many new faces. You can't expect to just win with that many new faces.
Yeah, the running back room is largely intact, which is great news. Willie Fritz wants to pound the rock. The bad news, Matthew Golden and Sam Brown both exited. That was like all of your wide receiver production from last year. You've got Joseph Manjack the fourth. He's going to need to step up and be great. 4 out of 5 offensive line starters are gone. But on the defensive side, you've got 2 returning starters. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The secondary is one of the worst in the country. They're going to switch to a 3-4 defensively. And Garrett, you mentioned it. A lot of portal guys from Tulane, elsewhere, as Fritz tries to build his culture, build up his program in Houston. Again, it's a team that's gonna wait. They're gonna take their lumps this year for the second year in a row. Unfortunately for Houston, I know that Cougars fans are, especially after the success that they enjoyed in the American, right? They expected to come into the Big 12 with the speed. They honestly had the physicality figured out on the offensive and defensive lines. They had been playing that ball so much better than other Group of 5 schools. They've receded a little bit, both on both sides of the ball. So Fritz is going to get them figured out. I think this is a 2-3 year rebuild, but yeah, this year, man, with that schedule, tough to find momentum. So I'll say, Cougar fans, hang on. A lot of fun things coming. It's just not going to be this season. The final team in this episode is the Baylor Bears, and the Baylor Bears are truly on the precipice of, I think, either fading to irrelevancy or making a comeback to being one of the contenders in the Big 12. And what I mean by that is 2 things. One, Dave Aranda finally seems to be recruiting at the level that we thought he was capable of doing so. But part B of that is Baylor is finally investing in the NIL game. I feel like I'm maybe the most qualified person on a podcast to talk about this because I was there helping Baylor build their NIL when this all first became legal. And the issue was that the Baylor boosters did not want to spend the money. They could not equate. They didn't have the vision to see dollars in now equates to success this year, next year, and beyond. Unfortunately, the community of Waco was a little bit asleep at the wheel. And I had multiple conversations with business owners where they were like, that doesn't make any sense for us. This doesn't make sense for us. This doesn't make sense for the players. It's no deal. And they were years late to this party. Now Dave Aranda gets up after a recruiting heater before Big 12 media days, and he's like, "Yeah, we're paying players now. Like, plain and simple. That's why we're succeeding." So I think the prospects for Baylor football, Trey, a lot better. The problem is Dave Aranda's got to keep his job this season.
Yeah, and it seems like he's really hitching his wagon to 2 additions this year, DeQuan Finn and Jake Spavital, the offensive coordinator. Yep. And anytime someone has hitched their wagon to Jake Spavital, it has not gone well historically. So maybe it'll work for Baylor. I don't know. Maybe it'll work for
Cal
Dave
was
Aranda.
fun last year.
Sure. Yeah.
The defense sucked, but
the defense was awful. And he has been at his best when he's been at Cal. I will give him that. Like, his best seasons as an offensive coordinator have been out at Berkeley. But anytime he's entered the Lone Star State, it seems like it has not gone well for Jake Spavital. But to focus on the players, again, DeQuan Finn is a huge, huge, huge addition. If you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know the story with Baylor. The reason that they have not been able to reach their ceiling is largely quarterback play and lack of skill talent at the wide receiver position. Is that a chicken or an egg conversation? Bad quarterback, bad skill position, bad receivers. Who knows? But the decision to not go with Gary Bohannon and go with Blake Shapen has really sunk Dave Aranda's ship so far at Baylor. Now he has a guy that's been proven at Toledo, MAC Player of the Year, 22 touchdowns last year up in Toledo. He has a guy that has had proven success at the quarterback position in college. Will it make a good jump at the Power 5 level? That remains to be seen, but he certainly has a guy that has done it on the field. So we'll see. Like, I'm very interested to see how this goes. I think it is a big Hail Mary for Dave Aranda to hire a new offensive coordinator, bring in high-profile quarterback in the transfer portal. It's a Hail Mary, but it could work out for them. Like, that the talent combination of Finn and Spavital, if Spavital can play up to DeQuan Finn's strengths, it could work.
I'm really curious to know how Finn transforms that offense, how he and Spavital work together. The offensive line is entirely rebuilt from last year. So too their pass rushing unit. We'll talk about them in just a second. But they bring in the likes of, well, Kurt Daniker from Ohio, who's now since medically retired. That absolutely sucks. Omar Agbedion from Montana State. Colton Thomason from Texas A&M. Sidney Fugar from South Carolina. I mean, they put out a call for offensive line help, and they have brought in a bunch of, really talented guys. Maybe it didn't work out at their previous spot or they couldn't get on the field like Colton Thomason. But that's great news, I think, considering their offensive line gave up 30 sacks a season ago. Defensively, I'm most curious about how they apply pressure to the quarterback. They lost 8.5 sacks worth of production from their team last year. TJ Franklin, Byron Vaughns, Gabe Hall, all graduated, all gone. If Dave Aranda can work his defensive magic and truly trust that Jake Spavital will move this offense down the field, Baylor could be a whole lot of fun. You pull up their schedule, and I think there's, aside from the game at Utah in week 2, I think there's a little bit of a runway to success here. Tarleton State, Air Force, which they're replacing everybody. We've talked about them already. At Colorado could be tricky. BYU at home, and then they get Iowa State on the road as well. The back half of their schedule is certainly the more scary side. So if they're going to make a bowl game this year, save Aranda's job, they got to get that hay in the barn early, because then you're at Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU. We'll see what the Horned Frogs are like this year. At West Virginia off a bye. Hopefully that bye helps them out. At Houston, Kansas to finish it out. I think you could get Baylor to 6-6. But again, you got to get those wins early.
Yeah, you've got to get them early, and you've got to win on the road. Again, another team, right? You have to me, a bowl game means you have to win at Colorado. I think that game that early in the season, that's a big, big swing game for both of those programs. Whoever wins that one is setting themselves up nicely to make a bowl game. The loser of that one is going to be playing catch up for the rest of the year.
I think if I had to pick, I would say Baylor can go 6-6. I think they can beat TCU at home, and then I think they can beat Houston on the road to get to 6-6. Question as we close this episode: does 6-6 and a glimmer of what the future could be, does that save Aranda's job?
I think if they make a bowl game, it would save his job, and they look good doing it. Like, the losses are competitive. They're coming up short in those games against the top half of the conference, but they're playing they're playing close games, close competitive games. I think that could save his job.
Okay. All right. We'll see. We'll see come late November if he's made it that far.
It would be a 3-win jump. They went 3-9 last year. 3-6 is a big jump.
It's true. That's fair. I am rooting for him. I think Aranda, he's obviously a great defensive coordinator. He's finally said that he is going to take his hands off of the offense. He just wants to manage the defense. Hopefully that pays dividends for Baylor this season as they try to get to a bowl game. That'll do it for part 1 of our Big 12 preview. Part 2 comes out Wednesday morning. We'll preview the top 5 teams in the conference on Friday. Again, if you've not already subscribed, join the Jimmies and the Joes by hitting that follow button, that subscribe button. You can find us over on YouTube as well if you're on the podcast side at 3Tech Pod, and we would love to continue the conversation for you in the comments. For Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How about